No one knows what truly happened to the lost colony of Roanoke. History tells us that in 1587, more than 100 English settlers vanished without leaving behind a single body. Their homes stood empty, their belongings were gone, and only one word remained, carved into a wooden post: Croatoan. For over 4 centuries, historians have searched for an answer, but what if the truth was far stranger than anyone ever imagined? The year was 1587. England was desperate to establish its first permanent colony in the New World. More than 100 settlers boarded a ship bound for a small island off the coast of what is now North Carolina. They weren't soldiers looking for glory. They were families, carpenters, farmers, blacksmiths, mothers carrying newborn children. Among them was Eleanor Dare, her husband, and her infant daughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child ever born in America. Leading them was Governor John White. He believed he was building the future. He had no idea he was sailing toward one of history's greatest mysteries. The first months were difficult. Food quickly became scarce. The surrounding forests were vast and unfamiliar. Some local tribes welcomed the newcomers. Others watched them from the trees, saying nothing. Every night, strange sounds echoed through the forest. Sometimes footsteps, sometimes distant voices. Whenever the settlers investigated, they found nothing. At first they blamed wild animals, then they blamed exhaustion. Eventually, they simply stopped talking about it. As winter approached, supplies began running dangerously low. The settlers begged John White to return to England for help. He refused. His daughter and granddaughter were there. Leaving them behind was the last thing he wanted. But without supplies, none of them would survive. With great reluctance, he boarded a ship and promised everyone the same thing: "I'll be back before the next harvest." No one knew those would be the last words they would ever hear from him. The Atlantic Ocean had other plans. Just days after reaching England, war erupted with Spain. Every available ship was taken by the Crown. John White pleaded with officials. He offered money. He called in favors. He begged captains to take him back. No one would risk the journey. Weeks became months. Months became years. Every single day, John wondered whether his family was still alive. 3 years later, he finally found a ship willing to cross the Atlantic. His heart raced the entire journey. He imagined Virginia running toward him along the beach. He imagined his daughter smiling as if no time had passed. He believed they had survived. He had to believe it. On August 18th, 1590, exactly 3 years after his granddaughter's birth, John White stepped onto Roanoke Island once again. The colony was silent. No smoke rose into the sky. No children laughed. No dogs barked. The wind was the only sound. He began running, house after house, empty. The doors stood open. The tables remained inside. Some chairs had been knocked over, but there were no bodies, no blood, no signs of battle. It didn't look like a massacre. It looked as if every single person had simply stood up and walked away. Then one of the sailors shouted. A wooden post stood near the entrance to the settlement. Carved deeply into it was a single word: Croatoan. John stared at it in silence. He remembered making an agreement with the settlers before leaving. If they ever had to abandon the colony willingly, they would carve the place they had gone. If they had been taken by force, they would carve a cross beside it. There was no cross, only one word: Croatoan. John believed his family was still alive, but he had no idea that someone had left him one final warning. John ordered the settlement to be searched from end to end, every cabin, every storehouse, every path leading into the forest. Hours passed, and the silence only became more unsettling. There were no graves, no signs of fire, no broken weapons, no evidence of a struggle. It was as if the entire colony had left peacefully and vanished before taking their next step. Then, inside what had once been his daughter's home, John noticed something hidden beneath a loose floorboard. A small leather journal. He recognized it immediately. It belonged to Eleanor, his daughter. His hands trembled as he opened it. The first pages described ordinary life. Food shortages, cold nights, hope that he would soon return. Then the writing changed. The letters became rushed, uneven, almost desperate. They keep watching us from the trees. Every night we hear voices calling our names. Some of the children have started answering the voices in their sleep. John swallowed. He kept reading. One man followed the voices into the forest yesterday. He returned before sunrise, but he wasn't the same. The next several pages had been ripped out. Only torn edges remained. Then, near the end of the journal, there was one final entry. It had been written with shaking hands. If you ever find this, do not follow us. They already know your name. John stared at the page for a long time. One of the sailors quietly asked, "Governor, what does it say?" John slowly closed the journal. Nothing important. He lied, because if the others read those words, they might refuse to continue. That evening, a violent storm rolled in from the sea. The captain ordered everyone back to the ship. "We leave at sunrise," he said. "This island is cursed." John said nothing. He waited until midnight. Then he woke two of his most trusted sailors. Without telling anyone else, the three men lowered a small boat into the water and quietly disappeared into the darkness. They followed the coastline toward Croatoan. By dawn, they reached the island. It looked abandoned. No smoke, no voices, no footprints along the shore. Yet something felt wrong. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Even the wind seemed to stop at the edge of the trees. Still, John stepped forward. The deeper they walked, the stranger the forest became. The trees grew impossibly close together. Branches twisted overhead, blocking out the sun. Hours passed. Then one of the sailors stopped. "Governor?" He pointed toward the mud. Fresh footprints, English boots, not one pair, dozens, all leading deeper into the forest. John's heart raced. "They're alive!" Without hesitation, he followed the trail. For nearly an hour, the footprints remained perfectly clear. Then, they simply ended. Not faded, not washed away. Ended. As though every person had disappeared in the exact same place. The sailors stared at the ground in disbelief. One whispered, "That's impossible." Before anyone could answer, they heard a church bell. One single chime, then another. John froze. There had never been a church on Croatoan, yet somewhere beyond the trees, a bell was ringing, and it was coming closer. The bell rang again, slow, heavy, as though it had been waiting for them. John looked at the two sailors. Neither of them spoke. They simply followed the sound. The deeper they walked, the colder the air became. The forest suddenly opened into a clearing. And there stood a church. John's heart nearly stopped. It was the same church the settlers had built in Roanoke. Every beam, every window, every stone. It was impossible. The church should have been miles away. Yet here it stood, untouched. Its wooden door slowly creaked open. Inside, candles were burning. Fresh wax dripped onto the floor. Someone had been there only moments before. The three men entered cautiously. The pews were empty. Dust covered everything, except a narrow path leading to the altar. On the altar lay another journal. John opened it. It was Eleanor's handwriting. Only one sentence had been written. "If you have come this far, they already know you were here." At that exact moment, the church bell stopped. Silence. Then, footsteps. Not one pair. Hundreds. Slowly circling the church outside, the sailors rushed toward the door. When they pulled it open, The clearing was gone. There was only forest, dense, endless, as though the church had never existed. One sailor panicked and ran into the trees. John shouted after him. No answer came. Only silence. He was never seen again. The remaining sailor whispered, "We have to leave." But John refused. "My daughter's out there." He stepped deeper into the woods. The last sailor reluctantly followed. For the next 3 days, they wandered through the forest. The sun barely pierced the canopy. Time itself seemed to lose meaning. Sometimes they walked for hours, only to find themselves back at the same fallen tree. At night, voices echoed between the branches. Some cried for help, some laughed, some called John's name. Each voice sounded familiar. Too familiar. The sailor begged him not to answer. John never did. On the 4th morning, the sailor disappeared. His footprints simply ended beside a stream. John searched until sunset. He found nothing. Now, he was completely alone. Late that evening, he saw someone standing between the trees. A little girl, barefoot, wearing the same small blue dress she had worn 3 years earlier. John's breath caught in his throat. Virginia. She slowly turned toward him. It was his granddaughter. She hadn't grown, not even an inch. Not a single day seemed to have passed. She smiled, but her eyes looked strangely empty, as though she had witnessed something no child ever should. John ran toward her. She raised one hand. "Don't." Her voice was calm, almost emotionless. "You shouldn't have come." Tears filled John's eyes. He returned to England. He told everyone the colony had vanished. He never mentioned the church, the voices, or his granddaughter, not even once. Years later, after John White's death, workers found a folded piece of paper hidden inside a locked wooden chest. On it, in faded ink, was a single sentence. For more than 3 centuries, John White's story remained exactly as history remembered it. The lost colony had vanished. No one knew why. No one knew where. And no one questioned the official account. Until the spring of 1894. While restoring an abandoned estate, once owned by White's descendants, workers discovered a small oak chest hidden inside a sealed stone wall. It had no lock, no markings, only John White's initials burned into the wood. Historians believed they had finally found the missing journal that could solve the mystery of Roanoke. News spread across England within days. Scholars gathered to witness the opening. The lid creaked. Inside, there was no journal, no map, no letter, only a single piece of folded parchment, carefully wrapped in faded cloth. When they unfolded it, they found a child's drawing. At first it looked innocent, a forest, a church, a little girl holding an old man's hand. The old man was unmistakably John White. The little girl could only be Virginia Dare. Behind them stood dozens of people, men, women, children, all staring directly at the artist. Their faces were pale, expressionless, almost waiting. The historians assumed it was nothing more than a child's sketch. Then one of them noticed something, hidden between 2 trees. Someone else was standing there. Only half of the figure could be seen. Its face had been scratched away, as though someone had desperately tried to erase it. Silence filled the room. One scholar carefully turned the drawing over. On the back, written in faded ink, was a sentence. Just 4 words. He looked back. Everyone was confused. Looked back at Sao Jaritia. Part 4, 914 characters. What? No one understood, until another document was found beneath the parchment. A torn page from John White's own notebook. The handwriting matched perfectly. The final sentence had never appeared in any official record. It read, "Virginia warned me never to look behind me. I failed her." The note ended there. No signature, no explanation, nothing. From that day forward, the mystery only grew deeper. If John White truly looked back, then how did he escape? Who carried the chest back across the ocean? Who hid it inside the wall? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, if Virginia never left the forest, who drew the picture? To this day, no one has answered those questions. Some mysteries fade with time. Others wait patiently for the next person curious enough to follow the trail. And somewhere, deep within an unnamed forest, the bell is said to ring. Only once, for those who answer when their name is called. Oh.